once again, you say Dragon Ball Z, and then for me, I thought about it. They kept calling him Superman. It was a
Yeah.
Superman fight. You
Yes.
know, Superman against whoever, Lobo, Darkseid, eventually Man of Steel. Zod.
Yup.
Like
Let's get some
it, it,
Zod in there.
it felt like Superman going against somebody. Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak,
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
and we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel. Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Here we are.
We are currently going through a franchise, and we're on the third movie of that franchise. So,
Oh yeah.
uh, at the time, it was considered to be the end of the franchise, but then it came
hmm
back again later on. We'll get to that when we get to that. So, um, this movie was directed by the Wachowskis. It was released November the 5th of 2003. Today, the Panel Bros are going to be doing a breakdown for The Matrix Revolutions.
Revolutions. Bro, listen. This was another movie theater experience that I had a really good time with. And knowing that it only came out a few months after Reloaded in theater, the hype train on that was still high. So going to go see this in the theaters, I was super excited. And I remember having a really good time at the theater. Again, I was 18 years old at the time and getting to rewatch it. There's a lot to enjoy about this one. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, they as in, I don't know, Warner Brothers, the Wachowskis, they originally, and we covered this, they originally wanted
Mhm.
to release Reloaded and Revolutions mere weeks from one another, and that would have been nuts.
Ah, that
You
would
know,
have been
could
crazy.
you imagine that double feature?
I would have been,
So,
oh my God, I would have been so excited. And I wonder if there would have been people that would have waited and were
right.
like, oh, try to see them like as close as possible. I wouldn't have been able to wait. But the idea, like, I remember just being so eager,
Yeah.
seeing the trailer after Reloaded in theaters. I was so eager, and knowing we only had to wait a few months, I can just imagine how exciting it would have been if it was only a few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, once again, and we're talking about like 2003. Usually sequels take a long time to come out
Yes.
in between movies. So for 6 months
Yeah, dude.
between two movies, it was really cool for them, that they actually did that. So,
Yep.
alrighty. So let's get into it here with the plot. So,
Yes.
yeah, one moment here. So the Matrix Revolutions picks up immediately where Reloaded ended. So we're here in our
hmm
opening scene. Neo and Bane, they lie unconscious in the medical bay of the ship Mjolnir. Trinity wakes up and she's keeping a watch over Neo. They mention Niobe and Ghost and
Yes.
their adventure. we mentioned
Yes.
this in our Reloaded breakdown. It's pretty much the story of Enter the Matrix. So Neo is showing signs of someone that is jacked in, even though he is not. And the machines are closing in on Zion. Seraph calls and asks for Morpheus. And he says, I bring you word from the Oracle. You must come at once. So
Yeah.
this is our opening here. All righty. So, unlike the other two movies who went for big to
hmm
open the movie, this one kind of opened a little more quiet than we're
Yeah.
used to.
I did appreciate that it literally starts where the last movie ended,
Yeah.
because the last thing we see them is on the slab and it says to be concluded. So the fact that we open right there, I don't know, it's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the movie, that it feels like it truly is a continuation or the final act of Reloaded. Like, it just goes Reloaded to be concluded, and then you watch it and you're there. And because we're covering these movies back to back, I've only seen them a week apart on the rewatch. It feels really, really cool to be able to just kind of hit play and we're already in it. There's no longer this build. Like, we're not building up the story at this point. Now we're like, hey, we're here. We're in the climax. Let's get going.
Seraph contacts Morpheus and Trinity on behalf of the Oracle, and they inform him of Neo's confinement.
Mhm.
Um, excuse me, she informs them of Neo's confinement. So when they meet her, she looks completely different. It's
Yep.
discussed a little bit, and they ask, "Who are you?" "I'm the Oracle," and they just kind of start looking at each other. So already we're already building some more secrets and
Yes.
mysteries in the movie. There is a practical reason for
Mhm.
why the Oracle looks different, and we're going to get to that later.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so inside the Matrix, Neo is trapped in a subway station named Mobile Avenue, a transition zone between the Matrix and the machine world. He meets a quote unquote family of programs, including a girl named Sati. The quote unquote father tells Neo the subway is controlled by the Train Man, a program loyal to the Merovingian.
Yep.
When Neo tries to board a train with the family, the Train Man refuses and overpowers him. So,
I love this
yeah,
sequence, by the way. Go on, but I
yeah,
love
yeah,
this
yeah.
sequence.
We're gonna chat a little bit. So they have this conversation about him loving his family, the father, um, there, and the nature of love, and also Neo's love for Trinity. It's a conversation about programs and what they're capable of. So you said that you enjoy the family. We only got to see them for a little
Oh,
bit. The father in
I
particular,
I
beast.
love the father. Like, there's this really nurturing nature about and around the father. The idea of these programs having such connection, they're talking about love, and Neo kind of being taken back and surprised by this notion because to him, like, your programs and this is a human response, is a human emotion. And I love that the father figure is like, no, love is just a word. It's about the connection and what the word represents. And I don't know why. Like, it's not even that deep of a thought or a sentence, but it just hit in a way that I thought it was so unique because you know the separation of humans and machines in these movies has been very black and white. You have the humans and you have the machines take over. They use the humans as a battery source and energy, and all of a sudden we're meeting like these programs that are having emotional connections, that have this family bond, and you have this father figure who is doing everything in his power to protect his daughter. They even bring up the idea of like, hey, like, she is a result of him and his wife, but in the Matrix, if you do not have a purpose, you are deleted. And he is willing to do what he needs to do to save his daughter. And again, it's just interesting concept because we had this trilogy, and right now in Revolutions where Neo and Trinity have shown time and time again they're willing to do anything for each other, for that
Right.
love, for that connection that they have. And now Neo's coming face to face with a program that not only understands that, but is also participating in such an act. And I do love that Neo is taken back, but he's going along with the process. He's taking it and he's learning. And it was just, I don't know, it was just such a great sequence. And in comparison to all like the war and action sequences that we're gonna get, it's one of my favorite somber moments of the entire trilogy. Is just this father figure just explaining to him, the definition of love or the connection. I just thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty tender moment, and we get a few of those over the
Mhm.
course of this movie. My biggest question on this rewatch was, um, and I remember when it happened the first time I saw it, and I know they explain it eventually, but I was really mad that the train man could out overpower Neo.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I had to do, like, I don't know if it's where you start to do cartwheels in your own mind to create your own headcanon, and I'm like, "Okay," like, he definitely says, like, "Hey," I always took it and I tried to convince myself. I was like, "Alright, this is not necessarily the Matrix per se, because they
Right.
do say it's that middle ground,
It's
like,
the
it's
in
that
between,
limbo."
correct.
They're like, "Alright, so you have Neo who is, in the Matrix is a godlike figure. And then in the real world, he's starting to come into terms with having power in the real world as well. But now he's somewhere in the middle. And when the train man says, like, I built this place, like, I created it, therefore I am the strongest thing within it. I was like, okay, all right, I'll take that. It is still very odd considering what we know Neo can do to see him in such a position. But I was like, oh, okay, I'll ride along with it. I'll ride
Yeah.
along.
And this is I'm just gonna say here, I always get upset that the train man never got his comeuppance against Neo.
Never, never,
We
nothing.
see the train man a few times
Yeah,
throughout the movie, but he never gets his comeuppance over the
nope,
course of this movie. He
nope.
rocked Neo with a punch too,
Yep,
you
one
know.
hit,
So,
bam, and Neo goes flying
but
into a wall, and he even says it. He goes, "Down here, I am God," and
yeah,
it's like, okay, but yeah, you never really deal with the train man in that sense again. Like you just
yeah.
don't like no, no.
Alrighty, so um,
Oh yeah.
so Seraph, Morpheus, and Trinity enter Club Hell. They're on their way to rescue Neo. That's why they're here. They need to
Hmm.
confront the Merovingian. Basically, he's the one keeping Neo captured here. So we have an action sequence here. They drop this line here. If we are lucky, one man will be checking the guns. And if not, then there will be many men.
There would be many, and as soon as
uh,
they open that door,
oh, yeah. So there are many men. And I thought it was really nice that they put the woman, they put her in the elevator. It's like, no, you're not a part of this. So
mhm,
we're going to keep you safe.
yeah.
And we got our first major action sequence here. The people jump on the ceiling.
Oh yeah, dude.
They are firing upside down while the team fires from the ground. The men are jumping off the walls, flipping around. These opponents are skilled, much like the team of people Neo faced in Reloaded.
Mhm.
And the fight ends with Trinity doing the signature kick.
Oh
So
yeah.
um, I'm glad that we got this early on because
Mhm.
um, when I first saw it, I was just like, all right, come on, man. Like we usually get some action
Yeah,
sequences and
yeah,
such,
yeah.
what are we doing? The seal's a little quiet, but we just jump right back into it again. And um, in a way, we already saw, people going against, I'm assuming these are programs
Mhm.
um, that know how to, manipulate the matrix a little bit here. So what
Yeah.
can we show that we haven't seen before? It's like, oh, they're going to do the fight from the ceiling. All right, that's new. So let's see how this
Yeah.
goes.
It was really cool because, yeah, like you mentioned, the idea of like fighting on the ceiling. We've seen characters jump far distances. We've seen characters like Neo fly, but to actually go onto the ceiling and remain on the ceiling, and it was this great upside down fight where they're right side up and these characters are upside down and they're kind of switching and going back and forth. The Wachowskis are still finding ways to like give us something we haven't seen yet in the franchise. Because again, we've seen flight and everything else, but the idea that you had these characters like running on the ceiling, it was really cool. And obviously, you get all the gunfire and gunplay and Trinity with the signature kick and whatnot. So they reminded us of like, hey, don't worry, we still got those cool action sequences for you.
Yeah, and thankfully our team is successful, and they make their way to the Merovingian, and here we go with these people again.
Mhm.
Um,
There she is, bro. I was waiting. I was waiting. I was like, where is she? There she is.
yeah, so uh, they confront the Merovingian and force him to release Neo. So this is intricate sequence as well. We just had one sequence with the action. Now it's
Mhm.
a more psychological sequence, as it always is when the Merovingian, and to a certain extent, his wife Persephone is involved.
Mhm.
So they ask for a deal to release Neo, and the Merovingian asks for the eyes of the Oracle. Where some see coincidence, I see consequence. Where others see choice, I see cost. The Merovingian says this is a fair deal so they can have their savior back.
Yeah.
So we end up having a small fight here. Everyone pulls out a gun on everyone,
Yeah.
and Trinity has a gun to the Merovingian's head, demanding Neo. Persephone says, believe it, she'll do it. If she has to, she'll kill every one of us. She's in love.
Yep.
So the Merovingian bends, and Trinity and Neo are reunited. Um, so let's break down the scene here a little bit.
I do like this scene a lot because obviously we're back in that situation with Trinity where, we have this love and this loyalty, and he looks at her and she's got the gun to his forehead and he says, "You're really willing to die for Neo. And she pulls the hammer of the weapon and she goes, believe it. Like she's willing to do that. And again, it constantly shows, as we talk about, man, like there's this connection with Trinity and Neo, and they keep giving of instances to show us how far these characters will go. And he's kind of just like, all right, I don't want to die for this cause. All right, we'll let it happen. So we get the reunion with Trinity and Neo, and again, like it's just this love story. And I said it when we talked about the other movies, especially with Reloaded, like we have this battle for Zion. We have the battle with the machines. We have the architect. We've got Morpheus. We got props. We got all this. But there is a love story in this movie. You know what I mean? And within this trilogy, there is a big, significant love story. And Trinity runs out of the train. They embrace one another. You got the score hitting. And I'm just like, this movie stays reminding me that at its core, there is a beautiful love story here.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't see the Merovingian and Persephone again. This is it. It's their
Nope.
last appearance, and maybe
That's
the
it.
Wachowskis did that on purpose. These two intriguing characters, the
Mhm.
Merovingian in particular, they're not meant to be seen too long because then the
No,
mystique goes away, I guess.
it could be that. And storyline wise, like they don't really seem too in particular what's the word, they don't necessarily care for this quote unquote war that's happening. You know what I mean? Like they feel like they're in their own little world, kind of just enjoying what they're doing. Persephone, unfortunately for her, is like she's missing out on love and wants that back, and he's just doing whatever he wants to do. And I feel like they're kind of just like in their own bubble. Like there's this war between the man and the machines. They don't think man's gonna win, and they're just kind of like staying in the background doing their own thing. They're like, we're out here
Well, to your point,
doing
they're
our
not
thing.
exactly the machines; they're the programs.
They're programmed, so like to them it's just like, this is what we're
Yeah.
programmed to do. Like we're just hanging out and chilling. Like, so yeah, I don't think there's much else they could have provided us in this movie, especially because of what's happening. And like you said, I feel like the Wachowskis do a good job with introducing us new characters that we want to see more of, and always knowing when not to overdo it. So we get them just enough. But I can always take more, Monica Bellucci. Like you can always add more scenes of her in these
Exactly.
movies, and I'm ready. I'm ready.
I was so, at the time, happy with her role in Reloaded. I was so
Mhm.
disappointed that this was it. This is all we
Yeah, that's
saw of
it.
her,
That's
you know?
literally it. Reloaded, she has a great moment, and this one is very much like, oh, she'll do it. She's in love, and you think maybe you're gonna see her again or something, and you're like,
Nah,
nah, that's about it. That's about it.
nothing. We did see the Train Man again, so it's
Mhm.
confirmed he is working for the Merovingian.
Yep.
Um, I made a note here for this rewatch. Um, do you think that this may have happened a little too fast, this reunion between Neo and Trinity?
It it does happen very quickly, and having seen the whole movie, I understand it why when the movie's finished, because again, there's a lot that happens in this movie. Like
Right.
there is multiple parts, there are multiple characters with multiple jobs. And I'm like, all right, like they've established the idea of like we got to get them together ASAP and kind of send them off on their own mission. Like Neo and Trinity are gonna be off doing their own thing very, very soon. And I think that's probably the reason why they come together very fast. Because it's almost like it reminds me of like a show where they leave you with a cliffhanger, and then at the very beginning of the next episode, it's solved. Like you think they're gonna
Right.
hang on a little bit, and it's solved. So like Neo ends up in limbo, and you're like, oh no, Neo's in limbo. And then in the very first act, you're like, okay, he's out of limbo. We're okay. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's like okay,
it
okay,
could have been a really intriguing, search mission,
yeah,
so,
yeah.
but it's fine, because then as the movie goes along, we see why we needed Neo,
Yeah,
back again here.
it's something that makes a little bit more sense, like when the movie is coming to a close. You're like, all right, I see why we had to get him out so quickly.
So, troubled by the way, here we are with the Oracle, one of
Mm.
Ricardo's favorite characters.
I love these two characters in a kitchen just having a conversation. Sign me up.
Yeah. So, troubled by visions of the Machine City, Neo visits the Oracle, who reveals that Smith intends to destroy both the Matrix and the real world. She tells him that everything that has a beginning has an end. So they have yet another great meeting. They talk about her new look.
Hmm.
He becomes upset with her, and he says, he mentions the architect, Zion, and the ones before him. How about the truth? What you get to pick and choose what you tell me. Why didn't you tell me about all these other things? So he even asks about how he's getting powers outside of the Matrix now. And she tells him that there has to be a balance to the equation. And excuse me, he is the balance to the
Mhm.
equation. And is it he's the balance or he's the unbalance? I forget. But in any case, she used a parallel between him and Smith. One of them is to
Mhm.
balance the equation, and the other is to unbalance the equation.
Yeah.
And the Oracle does want to end the war. She talks, and she says, one way or another, it will end. And Smith versus Neo is the crucial part to the war ending.
Yeah.
Smith won't stop with the Matrix, though. He wants to end the real world too. So that's the big talking point here between the Oracle and Neo.
Yeah, I love this conversation because Neo is justifiably upset after learning everything he's learned from the architect about there being, this being done 6 times. And he asked the question, he goes, "Why didn't you tell me? Like, why?" And it boils down to the reality that he wasn't ready to hear that yet. Like the
Right.
last time they had that kind of a conversation in the kitchen, he did not want to be the one. There was so much doubt within himself, and to the point where it was very vague. He was like, "I'm not the one." Like he answered it for her. She goes, "All right," and he goes, "I'm not the one." She goes, "Sorry, kid, you got the gift, but there's something holding you back." She couldn't drop all that knowledge on him at that point, like, and he knows it. And then he looks and he turns around, and he kind of looks at the writing above the doorway, and he says, because he was like, "Who decided I'm not ready?" He goes, "Oh, I did." And and she did the whole thing. And this is where things started to get really interesting. I feel like this is where we started to learn a lot more about what happened with Agent Smith and Neo, where, because obviously this is all about computers and programs and codes and mathematical equations. And when she talks about how Neo and Agent Smith are like this equation. And I was like, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? I started to understand it to a degree where obviously when Neo copied himself by going into Agent Smith and Agent Smith continues to send copies of himself, there's this balance. You know what I mean? Like you have Neo on one end and you have Agent Smith on the other. And they're both on opposite sides of this equation. And there needs to be a balance. And it's going to come to an end, and it also helped me understand the ending, and we'll get there when we get there. But I did appreciate another great scene with Oracle and Neo having a conversation in the kitchen, just talking about what's going to happen. So I'm always looking forward to these kind of scenes.
Yeah, and then so now she spills the beans. She lets him know. It's like, no, this is about the war ending.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to let you know it's not just about the war ending, it's about your world ending. Because if Smith wins, not only would the machines be done with, you will be done with
Yep,
too.
that's
So
over.
so that's why it's important for you to win. After Neo leaves, a large group of Smiths assimilates Sati and Seraph. The Oracle does not resist assimilation, and Smith gains her powers of precognition. So we find out a little bit more about Sati. He calls her the last exile.
Mm-hmm.
And then Smith has this conversation with the Oracle, and they're doing this like verbal sparring. They're going back and forth here. And she calls him a derogatory term here, and he says, "You would know, Mom."
When he says you wouldn't know, Mom, I don't know why. I remember in the theater having an audible reaction. Like
Yeah.
it was very like on the nose, opposed, with everything that's happening. The architect is the father and Oracle is the mother, and she uses that term, and he goes, "You would know, Mom." And I don't know why. Like it just works so well within the scene. And I love this scene because Agent Smith is doing this whole idea of like, this is going to happen. So why are you here? Why wouldn't you go? Did you know I was going to do that? I threw the cookies at the wall.
Yeah.
And he's like, you knew I was going to do that. But if you knew I was going to do that, you baked those cookies on purpose, deliberately, also placing them there on the table purposely, deliberately, in order for me to do that. And it's this conundrum of like, do you know how this is going to end? And it just gets to the point where she's like, just do what you came here to do, man. Just do
Right.
what you came here to
I
do.
already know why
And
you're
he's
here.
like, yep, I know. You know what I mean? And I God, one of my favorite lines that she has in the scene is like, everything that has a beginning has an end, and that's
Yeah.
going to come into play later. So I'm like, okay, this is going to mean something. So we have that moment where he simulates and he copies on to the Oracle, and we see like this is different. Like this is different. Like you start to see the atmosphere change. You start to see interference, and you see the code, and you even see a little bit of fear and hesitation in Agent Smith, because even he is not sure, what's going to happen copying onto the Oracle. And you have this. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie because it's so small, but it's very mustache twirling,
Yes.
where the Oracle stands up now as Agent Smith, and the other Agent Smiths all back up, kind of worried, like, okay, what's gonna happen? And he just takes the glasses off and lets out like this just insane maniacal laugh.
Right.
Just very much like, oh my God, like I'm all knowing. Like I know what's gonna happen. I know how this is gonna be. Like I know now. Like I have an inside look or at least a hunch of what's gonna happen. But yeah, this was an awesome moment.
Yeah, I hope that was meant to be funny, and if not, even as an
Yeah.
unintentionally funny moment, it was still a great
Yeah.
moment. You know, they put
It's
it in
yeah,
the
it's good.
they put it in the trailer, and I
Yes,
remember
they
that.
did.
They put it in the trailer. Um, and then just once again, whenever the Oracle's in a scene, it's not just to be there.
Mhm.
So it was just a little bit just back and forth with her and Smith. And then, he simulates her and we see the code. And I wanted to bring it up here. We don't just see the code to see it. Whenever they show us the code, it's usually a big moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So um, that's as far as that goes. So we're back in the real world here. And the crews of the Nebuchadnezzar and the Mjolnir find and reactivate Niobe's ship, the Logos. They interrogate Bane, who says that he has no recollection of the earlier massacre. Want to give credit to the actor here. He
Yes, please
did,
do.
did a great Hugo Weaving impression.
Unbelievably good Agent Smith cadence.
Yeah.
I remember after the movie I was trying it. Like when I was growing up, I remember like, could I talk like him if I wanted to? Because he did such a good job. And I remember being like, man, that guy nailed it. Like he nailed it so well to the point where I'm like, how does Trinity and Neo not pick up on this guy like nothing? Like they're so focused with everything else. But his cadence was so on point. I give him major credit to the point now that when I see that actor in movies today, I still feel like Agent Smith is in there somewhere.
Right. Outside the ship, Morpheus leads a team. They're getting supplies. They're trying to repair some things here. It felt like we were in an alien movie.
Oh
With
yeah,
the
yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah,
gear
yeah.
that they were holding and the atmosphere that
Mhm.
they were in? Alright. I wanted to know if you picked up on that too.
Yeah, with a lot of these sci-fi stuff, sometimes you get that crossover feel, and I was like, "Ooh, I like. Okay, I feel it. I
Yeah,
feel it."
they call the Sentinels squids.
Hmm.
So, as the captains plan their defense of Zion, Neo requests a ship to travel to the Machine City. Motivated by her encounter with the Oracle, Niobe offers him the Logos.
Yeah.
And, the one captain is like, "Are you mad?" Like, she's like, "Listen, you could do with what you want with your ship. Don't tell me what to do with mine."
Yep.
And it's mentioned that she doesn't believe in the one because Morpheus asked her, "No, I don't believe in the one, but I believe in him."
Yeah.
So great line.
Very, very, very good line. And we have another situation where people are kind of vague about what the Oracle told them because
Yeah.
she's willing to give up her ship. And Morpheus is like, "You spoke to the Oracle." And she goes, "Yeah, recently." "What did she say?" And goes, "Exactly what I needed to hear." And I love that. I love that we still have that where like some things are meant for us. You know what I mean? Like some things of importance, things that we need to know are meant for us. And she's like, just know, like she told me what I needed to hear. And I do love that line so much that you brought up, where it's like, I don't believe in the one, but I believe in him. And I'm like, ah, that's such a good line. It's so
Yeah,
good.
it's great. So Neo departs, accompanied by Trinity. Bane, who has stowed away on the Logos, he takes Trinity hostage. And she just thinks that Bane has gone mad. He's lost his
Yeah.
mind. Um, and they're just so confused why this is happening. And if not for the conversation between Bane and Neo, he didn't realize he was Smith until then.
Mm-hmm.
So Neo realizes that Bane has been assimilated by Smith, and a fight ensues. Bane burns Neo's eyes with a power cable, blinding him. After becoming blinded, Neo discovers that he can still see machine source code in the real world. And because of that, he could see the source code on Bane that he was Agent
Ah,
Smith.
so good.
He uses this ability to kill Bane. It's a great moment. And before he puts Bane away, well, Smith, he says, "There's nowhere you can go that I won't find you."
Dude, this whole scene is so good because you have Bane who takes Trinity hostage and he's trying to tell Neo, like, look beyond the flesh. Listen, like, just look. And Neo does the it's impossible. And he hits us with the Agent Smith. He goes, not impossible, Mr. Anderson. Inevitable. Like, I like the idea that he will follow him anywhere. Like the idea that Agent Smith has simulated Bane and made it to the real world is such a wild concept. And I was so happy we got to see it explored and we get the fight sequence and whatnot. And when he blinded Neo, I remember this being an absolute shock in the theater because we're not even halfway through this movie. And I'm
Right.
like, hold on. Like, Neo is at a severe loss right now. Like, he has no vision. I'm like, how is this? Like, within the Matrix, he'll be able to see. But I'm like, this movie is a war film. Like, we have a lot of scenes outside of the Matrix. I'm like, how is this going to work? So when he sees the source code, like, he's walking and Bane is very confident. Like, oh, like, he can't see him and he's walking in the shadows and he tries to take a swing at Neo and he misses and Neo catches him and Neo just says, I can see you. And you see the code and it's this great yellow, astral projection kind of thing. And it's like flames and fire. It looks incredible. And you get the amazing shot of Agent Smith. And as you mentioned, right before he takes him out, he goes, there isn't a place that I won't find you. And I'm like, it's this feud between these two. I'm so happy that as an antagonist, they kept Agent Smith for all three films for scenes like this.
So we talked about this off the air. Now we're going to mention it here. We start going into some nonstop action. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah, dude. Yes.
So it's nuts. There's so many sentinels. They look like a swarm of insects. There's so many just devouring their way through everything in Zion. Niobe and Morpheus rush towards Zion in the Mjolnir to aid the human defenses. We get the scene of a speech, and they're in these super suits once again with a possible aliens reference, alien/aliens reference. Zion's shipyard is overwhelmed by a horde of sentinels, and the fatally wounded Captain Mifune instructs the kid to open the gate for the Mjolnir, which he does with the aid of Z. When it arrives, it discharges its EMP, disabling all the sentinels present, but also Zion's remaining defenses. So the humans are forced to retreat and wait for the next attack, thinking it will be their last stand. So we get our first major battle sequence here. A lot happens.
Bro, this excuse me, this was my gush moment. Like, I was watching this and on a rewatch, I've seen this movie numerous times. And it's always so much fun when a movie can remain as exciting as it was the first time you saw it. And I remember this entire sequence feels like a nonstop ride. You have so many moving parts. You have so many characters with different jobs doing so many amazing things. You have Niobe on her ship. Her main priority is getting to Zion. That is it. It is getting there, using the EMP to take out as many sentinels as they possibly can. So you had this amazing chase sequence happening. So you have a chase sequence. You have in itself, you have one core of this war is a chase sequence. And look, Jada Pinkett Smith as Niobe in this scene goes hard, dude. She takes off the shirt. She's got a tank top. You see the pectoral muscles. Like, they're riding, dude. They're going hard and they're dropping quips and they're having this amazing chase. Meanwhile, you have kind of like the mech suits and Mifune and everybody like just standing their ground, holding their ground. And there was one thing that I did want to mention, and I texted you when I watched it. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie. It's with the kid and Mifune.
Yeah.
And the kid just wants to help. He just wants to help. He wants to be a part of the helping process. He wants to fight the machines. And Mifune's just like, "How old are you, kid?" And he lies. Like, he lies about his age. And Mifune's like, "Oh man, if you should have said 16, at least I would have believed that." And he goes, "Okay, I'm 16." And goes, "Too young. You got to be 18 to be in the Corps. 16 years old, too young to do it." And the kid says that line, "The machines don't care how old I am. They'll kill me all the same." And I don't know why like that hits so hard, because again, this is a literal war. It does not matter to the machines at all. A human is a human. Their job is to take them all out. And he goes, darn if that ain't the truth. And he's like, "All right, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go, you're gonna load up mechs, and you're gonna do your job. You just stick to that job." So you have Mifune and you have these other soldiers that are on the ground level fighting off every sentinel coming in. And there's this one shot, man, and I know you know it. There's a shot where the sentinels are coming in and they're all opening fire and they're keeping them at bay. And there's a moment where so many sentinels come through at one time, it like looks like a fist and it opens it to like a hand and it just starts
Yeah.
consuming everything, dude. And I was like, that's horrifying. Like, we are not winning this battle, but nobody quits. Then you have Link's wife with her partner just doing what they have to do, taking out numerous gigantic drills. These two people by themselves with a rocket launcher took out two massive drills. They're doing their thing on the ground. You got the kid and Mifune over here, and you get that moment where you can see that pretty much all hope is lost. And Mifune is there, and the kid is trying to load the mech suit, and it's jammed. And Mifune does the whole "get away, kid," like it's like forget it. And the kid gets it in, and Mifune just goes, "All right, that like this is the last stand." And he does the whole, just lets out the primal rage yell, opens fire. The kid is right behind the mech suit hiding, and just goes toe to toe with all the sentinels. Obviously, Mifune doesn't make it. He doesn't make it, but it was one of those moments where it just gives you chills, man, because he's not going to go down without a fight. He
Yeah,
knows he's
it's
not winning this.
yeah, and it's a trope that I don't mind, like the one
Mhm.
character that will go down swinging,
Yep.
and,
Yep.
this character didn't have much to do in the movie, but he made his one scene count,
Yes.
it was great.
It's one of those things where like he's not in a lot of the movie, but when I think about Revolutions, I will always think of Mifune. Like I can't help but not think about that guy. And as you see, he's pretty battle damaged. This is pretty much the end of Mifune. He tells the kid like, "Hey, you've got to open the bridge, man. Like, they're coming. We need them. You got to go do the job." And he goes, "I never passed the training course." And Mifune just kind of laughs and goes, "Neither did I." And it shows you that like many people became soldiers before they had any right to. And it's that nasty side of war. And the kid gets into the mech suit and he's running to the bridge, running to the door, trying to get the gate open. And he gets tackled by Sentinel. And Link's wife, I'm so upset that I forgot her name within the movie, shows up, blasts the Sentinel, is like, "Come on, do it, kid." And he says, "Neo, I believe." And he's able to shoot and open it. Niobe's ship comes in. They crank the EMP, knock all the Sentinels out. And this is like a solid 20 plus, maybe even 30 minutes. I would have to look back and time it and see how long it is. But like, it feels like a 20 plus minute just action ride, dude. It's one of my favorite sequences in the whole movie was this giant war piece.
So Trinity is now piloting the Logos to Machine City with a blind Neo next
Mm-hmm.
to her, and he's using his powers to kind of navigate along the way, even using the powers to take out the Sentinels as she's
Mm-hmm.
steering the ship there. The Logos is attacked by a wave of machines outside the Machine City. So, and by the way, we mentioned Machine City a few times here. You don't go there as a human being. You don't even
Nope.
try to go there because you're going to die.
100%.
Why would you go there? That's where their center base of operations is. You guys are in Zion. They're over there. Why would you try? But they know in order to win the war, that's what they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
To avoid the onslaught, they fly above them to the open sky, and we
Oh,
see the sun for the first time in the Matrix trilogy. And they crash into a building, fatally wounding Trinity, unfortunately. So I put down here that they have saved one another many times, but not this time. And however, if it means Zion is saved, then hopefully Trinity's death is not in vain. She gives us an emotional monologue and a send off here. So a few things happen here. I'm glad that we still got to see the sun because then
Mhm.
it explained that they just blacked out the
They
sky.
blocked yeah, they
It
blocked it
wasn't like
out,
they found a
yeah,
way to, like, block out the sun, obviously, but they
yeah,
blacked out the sky in the hopes of that solar energy not helping the machines, but the machines found a
mhm,
way around it, obviously, we explained that before. Um, so we got that really nice thing, and kudos to Carrie Ann Moss. She sold it like a person that saw the
yeah.
sun for the first time, you
It
know?
was, it was a really, really good moment, and I'm glad that she got it, especially considering what's about to happen, but for her to see the sun for the first time, was a very beautiful moment, and like you said, she just completely sells it. Um, I do remember watching this for the first time and being absolutely gutted that we lost Trinity. I
Yeah.
was absolutely gutted. Trinity was easily one of my favorite characters in the franchise. When people talk about favorite characters in movies, especially with heroines like Sarah Connors and things of that nature, Trinity's up there with me as well, with the Ripleys and the Sarah Connors and whatnot. So when we lost her, I was completely heartbroken. I was almost in denial watching it, thinking like, no, Neo's gonna figure this out. Like, we've seen Neo do amazing things. He's done things now in the real world. This is gonna it. They're not gonna do that to us. And she lets him know, like, you saved me once, but you not this time. I can't go with you. And I was just like, nah, man. Like, I remember getting choked up. I remember getting choked up the first time watching it, and even on rewatches getting choked up because I was just so sad that he was gonna have to do this alone. And she gives a great monologue, obviously. And one of the things that hurt the most was when she says the first time that she died before he brought her back, the last thing she said was, I'm sorry. And she wished that that wasn't the last thing she said, that she would have gotten an opportunity to say how much she loved him and how much he means to her and everything that he's given her. And she goes, but now I get to do that. And dude, I was just broken. And because like and Keanu, you don't get to see his eyes, so it's just his voice and his cadence, and he's begging her not to go. And she goes, so with your final moments, can you just kiss me, just kiss me. And he kisses her, and you see her hand go limp, dude. And I was done. I was like, oh man, I was completely heartbroken. But I got to give it to the Wachowskis because you got to be willing to lose major characters to remind us just how significant this battle is. But it really, really hurt. I can't front.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is a war, and to quote a phrase, it's the casualties of war,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And but if you notice, it didn't stop Neo.
Mm-mm.
It's to this it's a painful loss,
Yeah.
possibly the most painful loss he's ever had in his life. But once again, um, ending the war is what the priority is.
Yep.
So alrighty. So we've had a few wow moments
Hmm.
already. We got another wow moment here.
Yeah.
So Neo enters the machine city and encounters the leadership of the machines in the form of the Deus Ex Machina. Um, Neo warns that Smith plans to conquer both the Matrix and the real world and offers to stop Smith in exchange for peace with Zion. The Deus Ex Machina agrees, and the Sentinels shut down, stopping the attack on Zion. I've shared a screenshot here because this is, to me, the standout scene for me in the Matrix Revolutions. That there's a lot of great scenes in the movie, but this is the scene that I correlate with the movie because
Mhm.
he comes face to face um, with an entity serving as a being to talk to all the machines,
Yeah.
and it's a pretty wild scene here. The machines come together and form a face,
Yeah.
and they speak with Neo. It's wild.
Yeah.
They said they don't need Neo. They don't need anything. They could have killed Neo, but they didn't, and they knew he was telling the truth. And I liked that even though Neo was blind, he could still see what was going on around him. And obviously the machines are trying to be intimidating, and he doesn't move. He doesn't
Mm-mm.
flinch, not even once. So whatever it was about the way he spoke to them, because they know who he is.
Oh
They
yeah.
know what he can do. So it's not like they think he's just some person. They know who he is. Um, I just remember just being so shocked as I was watching this moment in the movie theater. I was just like, wow, you know, I know that they're intelligent. Clearly they are, but to come together like that, just as as a being, so they could talk to Neo one on one, that was such an interesting choice to me.
Yeah.
Um, what was your reaction the first time you saw that in the movie
It
theater?
it was so epic to see it because, like you said, all we've known up to this point is the idea of the Matrix, the Sentinels. Like, we haven't had a central being, if you will. And the idea that the computer in itself manifested into a humanoid face to have an actual conversation with Neo was nuts. Like, it was so crazy to see it, to physically manifest itself in a way. And I do love how Neo is in the scene. There's a strong confidence, and he tells them, he goes, listen, this is what Agent Smith is going to do. You've lost control of Agent Smith. This is what's going to happen. You can't stop him, but I can. And as you mentioned, they get very upset. We don't need you. And they yell, and he doesn't move a muscle. And he says, if that's true, then I'm wrong, and you should kill me now. Like, there's this very, like, I know what I'm here to do attitude that Neo has. And I loved it. And I like the idea that they even ask, what happens if you fail? And if you fail, and Neo just very confidently says, I won't. And they're like, all right, because like you mentioned, like, Agent Smith is like a virus in this matrix, and he's just completely taking over. He's going to destroy, and he's going to destroy the real world as well, the computers, the systems, everything. He wants complete and total collapse. So at the end of the day, the machines don't have anything to lose by letting Neo go in there and do their dirty work. They have nothing to lose by that. If Neo loses and dies in the process, they're like, okay, and then they'll figure out another way to get rid of Smith if they can. But if Neo's able to, successfully defeat Agent Smith, it's a win-win for them. But the sequence in itself, I'll never forget when Neo's just standing and you see it rise. Like, it's such a cool visual, man. And again, major credit to everyone who worked on the design and whatnot, and coming up with the idea that it would form like an actual face. But I do absolutely love the idea of Neo just having like an actual conversation with a central being that is the machines.
Alrighty, so we move on to our final battle here. Oh man,
This, I'm gonna say it before we even start, bro.
Go
This
for
is
it.
this is the most Dragon Ball Z live action fight I've ever seen in my life. Okay, go ahead, continue.
That's a
Continue.
good one. That's a good one. So the machines plug Neo into the Matrix, whose population has now been entirely assimilated by Smith. We're going to get to that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
The Smith with Oracle's powers step forth. This is now Smith Prime.
Yeah.
Telling Neo that he has foreseen his victory against Neo. After a fight, Neo appears to concede defeat and allows himself to be assimilated. Outside the Matrix, the machines send a surge of energy into Neo's body, which inside the Matrix causes the Neo Smith clone, then all the other Smith clones, to be destroyed, restoring the Oracle and killing Neo. So we have a lot to break down here. A lot
Oh my
happens.
god. There is, so I remember the advertisements for this movie was so heavily around this particular fight scene. Like the heavy rain, the slow motion fight, the amount of Agent Smiths watching. Like, this whole fight felt the way that it should. Meaning that we've been building up this final confrontation. We've been building, again, one of the biggest benefits of keeping Agent Smith as the main antagonist throughout all three films is you can build up, right? Like, the story's in the build, man. It's in the chase. And we get this really, really big moment. And I can't tell you how many times I rewatched this entire fight scene when I got this on DVD, dude. I put this thing in my Xbox because that's why I watch my movies on my Xbox. And I watched this particular scene so many times. I tried to learn the choreography. I bought the album. I listened to the score. Like, this sequence was just so awesome. It felt so big. Them using the rain, the strikes were so powerful that it would create bubbles in like buildings, and glass would throw and collapse everywhere. Again, it felt like two superheroes fighting. It felt like 100% like two superheroes fighting and causing massive damage, I should say. But all leading into that final moment where you have Agent Smith standing over Neo. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna bring up this line first. I'm gonna bring up this one line first, and I'm gonna let you talk a little bit more because there's more to discuss. One of my favorite lines of this particular fight is when Neo doesn't stop fighting and he keeps getting up. And Agent Smith's like, why? Why, Mr. Anderson? Why do you persist?
Yeah.
And Neo says, because I choose to. And dude, that's something that like transcends movies. You know what I mean? Where like just living your everyday life, man, you just keep going. And it's like, why is it? Because I choose to. Like, it's such a powerful moment, and it shows like Neo is fully aware of his responsibility, who he is, what he is here to do. He is not going to stop. Almost in a way where, Agent Smith has said multiple times, inevitable, and there's nowhere you can't go that I won't find you. Like, there's this inevitable nature that Agent Smith will always find Neo. And I love that Neo hits him back with the like, it's because I choose to. And that bothers Agent Smith.
Yeah, I put down that a lot happened here.
A lot.
The fight is epic. It's a thunderstorm, of course. It's at night. They're flying around and hitting one another. It becomes grounded momentarily, and you hear the choir and the score swelling. Smiths are everywhere, and I had to think about it. And based upon the plot summary here, Smith has taken over the entire world.
Yeah.
This is the entire population of people within the Matrix. So it wasn't just in this city, it was
No.
the entire world. And I never even thought about that before.
Yeah, dude.
They take to the skies again. Smith plunges Neo down to the ground in that Dragon Ball Z fight, as you would call it.
Bro, that's exactly what it is.
Then they have the monologue back and forth. Because I choose to. And once again, you say Dragon Ball Z, and then for me, I thought about it. They kept calling him Superman. It was a
Yeah.
Superman fight.
Yes.
Superman against whoever, Lobo, Darkseid, eventually Man of Steel. Zod.
Yep.
Like
Let's get some
it,
Zod
it,
in there.
it felt like Superman going against somebody. So, speaking of just imagery and such, we had to get the Christ pose before the end of the movie.
Bro, they made sure. Look, there's so many. Look, this happens with a lot of film. A lot of film does this, but especially with the
Right.
Matrix and Neo being the one, the Messiah figure, et cetera, the sacrifice, prophecy, fate, all that's intertwined with the Matrix movies. You know what I mean? Even to the point where when Neo allows him to simulate him, like he's making that sacrifice, that choice, because Neo is directly now connected to the source. He is connected to the machines in the machine world, and knowing that by letting Smith simulate him, Smith is now connected to the main source, and now the main source can now destroy this virus. Like he's connected to the main source, and it's so great because he's just kind of. I love it. I love it so much because Agent Smith freaks out, dude, when he says like everything that has a beginning has an end, Neo, and it hits him, and he goes, "Wait, what? No, I didn't say that. No, get away from me. It's a trick." And he goes, "What are you afraid of, Smith? You were right. You're always right. It's inevitable." And he allows him to simulate him, and we get that Christ-like pose. And again, it's that sacrifice moment, and it's just epic to see it happen.
It was an awesome way for the fight to end. After Smith assimilates Neo for a split second, you think Smith won
Yeah.
because Neo's been trying to avoid getting assimilated, and then the machines send the surge, and you see that Christ pose in that image that I shared. It's just such an epic moment, as if the fight wasn't already epic enough.
Yeah.
But we had to have that moment there. And as he's doing the Christ pose in the Matrix, he's doing the Christ pose in the real world too, because
Oh
the
yeah.
machines have propped him up in almost like a chair, but
Hmm.
like he has his arms stretched out and such. But this was the only way that it could happen. And like you said, um, it was the only way for them to get rid of Smith was
Yeah.
that Neo needed to be connected to
Yep.
Smith there. So epic fight, epic
Oh
moment
yeah.
to end um, to end it, and the machines keep their word.
Hmm.
The Sentinels withdraw from Zion. Morpheus and Niobe embrace, and Neo's body is carried away by the machine. So Neo dies.
Hmm.
You have this moment where everybody's just celebrating the kid. He did it. Neo did it. You know, the war is over. They actually did it. And Morpheus drops this line: "I never thought I would live with to see this moment with my own two eyes." Like it's such a wow.
Yeah.
They actually won. You know, it's a good moment here. The Matrix is rebooted, and the architect meets the Oracle in a park. They agree that the peace will last as long as it can, and that those humans who desire it will be offered the opportunity to leave the Matrix. The Oracle tells Sati, who created a beautiful sunrise for Neo, that she thinks they will see Neo again.
Yeah.
Seraph asks the Oracle if she knew this would happen. She replies that she did not know, but she believed. Um, so, no Rage Against the Machine this time, just a choir and orchestra. The movie and the trilogy at the time is over.
Yeah.
And that's our movie. So, let's get some initial thoughts here
Yes.
upon this rewatch here. Um, it does feel like you let out a sigh of relief
Hmm.
because thankfully, well, here's the thing: no one really won. It was just because it was always about the war and
Yeah.
who was going to win the war. But maybe the point of it was that maybe there would just finally be peace,
Yeah.
because we're far beyond humans repopulating the planet.
Yeah.
Like that's not going to happen anymore. That war already happened, and you guys lost that war. Now it's just a war for survival, not
Yep.
you guys beating the machines. And now it's like, well, you know what? Peace is here, and whoever wants to leave the Matrix, okay, they can leave. But there's still a lot left on the table though, because
Yeah.
now it's like, how many people from Zion want to keep going back in to break people out? How much how much can the machines withstand this happening before the war starts up again? But here we have the architect and the oracle, and then now Sati, just being a part of things of the rebuilding process. But just a nice way to end the movie, and we end the movie with a sunrise.
I I really like the end of this movie because it's not often, when it comes to movies with war where you get such an uplifting and hopeful ending because there's a lot of tragedy and there's death, and we lost Trinity, we lost Neo, we lost a lot of people in this movie. And you kind of, instead of you walking away with those feelings of like, oh man, I'm just so bummed we lost these characters, you realized it was for the greater good, and we get this really uplifting and hopeful moment with the sunset and no Rage Against the Machine, like you said, something more somber. And you bring up a good point that neither side really won a war, you know, but due to this war, the machines created agents in order to keep everyone in line. And one of their own agents went rogue to the point where they were going to destroy the machine world and the real world. Like it got so bad beyond repair that they had to come to a mutual understanding and agreement in order for the survival of both. And I do think that's an interesting take because as you mentioned, like nobody won the war. It was like, no, we will both lose this. We are both going to lose as a result of control. The machines tried so desperately to keep people in control that one of their own programs, and Agent Smith, decided, no, I want out of this. I don't want this. I hate this. This disgusts me. I hate humans. I hate being in control. I hate this whole idea. I'm going to destroy all of it. I'm stronger now than ever. And I love that it was kind of like, all right, well, we're either going to kill each other, the Agent Smith is going to destroy everything, or we can have this mutual understanding and this peace. And I do like that the architect, even you brought it up, says like, how long do you think this peace will last? And Oracle's like, as long as it can, as long as it has to. And she brings up she does. I do love the fact that she brings up the question, because I was like, okay, so what happens to all the humans? And she's just like, so what happens to everyone else? And he goes, they'll be free, you know. And she goes, and she does the whole like, will you keep your word on that? And he goes, what do you think I am, human? Like, of course,
Yeah, that was good.
And I do like that, where he's like, no, like this is how we operate. Like we operate statistically, mathematically, equations, etc. Like this, okay, this is what we've come to right now. This is the agreement. This is what we're gonna do. But initial thoughts on the rewatch, man, it's just a ride. Like this one feels like a ride. It absolutely feels like the whole movie feels like a third act to me. It just feels like a giant third act. And again, I was heartbroken that we lost characters. And one of my most hopeful moments is when Oracle does say, that she does believe we'll see Neo again. And like at this point, as you mentioned, this was the end of the franchise. Like at this point in time, when this movie first came out, this was the end. And even though I knew there was no more movies, I was kind of hanging on to that, like, oh, maybe we'll see Neo again. Maybe we'll see him again. Just because she said that, like, oh no, I have a feeling we'll see him again. And I thought it was a really nice, hopeful ending. One of the first that when it comes to the Matrix franchise.
So once again, the Matrix was a box office success here. Revolutions had a budget of between 110 to 150 million, and it made 427 million. So definitely a box office success here. Once again, due to lack of critical acclaim, not as high as the first Matrix movie, there were no Oscar nominations. It is the Matrix movie with the least critical acclaim of all the Matrix movies. I read that a lot of people gave the dip in special effects quality as the reason, because there was a lot of moments, I want to say during the fight with Agent Smith, where you could, it was a little shaky, especially the punches and them flying around and stuff like that. It felt like a dip in quality. And don't get me wrong, this was 2003, but the Wachowskis had already stretched the limits of what was possible. They put out this amazing movie in 1999 that looked nothing like anything we had ever seen before. And then in 2003, they did it again, and they continued pushing the limits of special effects. So it's a fair criticism that the special effects quality did kind of dip a little bit. Maybe they were strapped for time to get the movie out. Who knows?
It could be. And as we know, they filmed both movies back to back. So you have VFX workers and employees. They're working nonstop. Like as soon as they're done editing and working on Reloaded, they're continuing to work on Revolution. So it could have been time, it could have been exhaustion, it could have been a lot of things. We're not really sure what the schedule was like, but it could have been because again, it came out that same year, just a few months later. But you're right, because there is noticeable. I do remember being in the theater. I do remember having those moments of like, oh, that's definitely CGI. You know what I mean? Even scenes like they have that one shot, everybody knows it. It's the shot where Neo throws a punch in slow motion through the raindrops. And it hits it, and it really, really looks like a video game. Like in comparison to the first two movies, it does definitely dip in quality a little bit. It doesn't remove me from the movie. It didn't take me out of it. At this point, I'm already like, I got my heels planted in the ground. I'm on for the ride, but it is noticeable for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on in that scene too. You have these thousands and thousands of Smiths in the background, all the while this fight is going on. I mean, I don't recall at the time ever seeing a fight in the middle of the air like that. I mean,
like this? No,
I don't think so. The superhero movies had already started, doing their thing, the late 90s, early 2000s, but two characters flying and fighting each other in the middle of the air. Now that's like a common thing.
Yes.
That's a very common thing. But at the time, probably not. So I guess, if you want to give a pass, hey, it was 2003, guys. you
Yeah, you
know?
know what I mean? Like these guys are fighting on wires, on rigs. They were in one of those rigs where like they're rotating them and flipping, and they're just in a room with massive amounts of blue and green screen, getting hit with water. Like there's a big process here. That's why, and you bring up a very good point. I don't think I had seen a movie before this, and again, major credit to the Wachowskis because they kept doing this. I don't think up to this point I had ever seen a movie in live action that had a fight quite like this. They went really big. We're talking about that was no longer held by the rules of gravity, the rules of what we're used to in reality. It was like, no, like both these characters can fly. They can fly. They're creating sonic booms with raindrops. Like it was like, how do you have two of the most powerful entities within these movies have a fight? It would go like this. You're talking about massive amounts of destruction, buildings, implosions, multiple Agent Smiths, and everything else. Like, I can't imagine what the workload was like for the VFX employees. So I give them all their flowers.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but at the time, when you hear people give a criticism of the original Matrix trilogy, what did you hear more criticisms for? Reloaded or Revolutions in your circles or the people you spoke with?
I think for me, Reloaded probably got more because I remember, if I remember correctly, Revolutions feels just like a giant war movie. I do remember one complaint with Revolutions is that it spends a lot of time in the real world. And
Right.
I do remember a lot of people being like, "Oh man, I wish we had spent more time again within the Matrix because that's what many people had grown accustomed to, and that's what they love because that's where we get to bend reality, right? That's where we got to see all the cool stuff. And while we are in the Matrix a bit in the third film, not nearly as much. So I feel like that was the biggest complaint for Revolutions. But I think that Reloaded among my peers, I think Reloaded got slammed more by my friends for the plot, for the story itself, and
Well,
three kind of got more flack for the lack of time in the Matrix.
yeah, Reloaded's well, we cover this in our breakdown here. There was a lot to pick apart in Reloaded. There was a lot of new
Yeah.
concepts introduced.
Hmm.
A lot of people just weren't down with the rave scene that we spent a lot of time talking about, and for me, the architect scene made people hate the movie. Like there
Oh
was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
just
Oh
there was
yeah, dude. Yeah,
there was a lot about Reloaded, and with this one, yes, to your point, I think the fact that it spent a lot of time in the real world just kind of separated people from the fact of I wanted to see more of the Matrix, but you know,
yeah. Listen, the cave scene. I asked my wife today. I was like, "You've seen the trilogy, right?" And she goes, "I know I definitely saw the one with the cave." And
right.
that's how you know, like, again, it was such a significant moment and it was very easy for that movie to get picked apart. But I think the number one complaint I heard from friends about Revolutions was the lack of time in the Matrix. Again, for me, it wasn't really a big issue. I was a little surprised and taken back by it, but I was like, okay, we're going full war movie. We can't necessarily be in there the whole time. But when they were in it, by the end of the movie, I was definitely like, all right, this was worth the wait. Like they went hard in this fight.
We're gonna take a look at some movie trivia here for Revolutions, and I took down a couple excuse me, not plot points, but a couple points here. This is the biggest one for me, and this is probably the most memorable thing. It's part of the marketing. In an unprecedented simultaneous global release, this film opened at exactly the same moment in every major city in the world on Wednesday, November the 5th of 2003. And I put down Wednesday on purpose here. 6 a.m. in Los Angeles, 9 a.m. in New York City. For those of you that don't know, we are based on the East Coast, so it was 9
Mhm.
a.m. for us. 2 p.m. in London, 5 p.m. in Moscow, 11 p.m. in Tokyo, November 6th at 1 a.m. in Sydney, and at corresponding times in over 50 additional countries worldwide.
That's cool.
Um, they called this 0 hour.
Ah,
And
that's
if
so
you
dope.
and if you wanted to be a part of the Matrix Revolutions, the end of the epic trilogy, to be the first to see it, you would need to see it during 0 hour. So I was up and I
Nice.
went to 0 hour. I was a part of 0 hour. I went to see it at the movie theater um, with some friends, small well, friends and acquaintances, people, and I knew everybody in the theater, which was hilarious. And these were people I didn't really get to see too often. So when I
Mhm.
walked in, I saw all these people, and I was like, "Hey,"
Yeah,
like
what's going on?
all these acquaintances here, and such, and a few of us dressed in leather,
Yo,
So we
dude, I
so we
saw a
dressed in
lot of
leather.
that.
We dressed in leather and our sunglasses and such. So we all watched it. It wasn't a big group of people. It was 9 a.m. on a
Oh,
weekday, on a
yeah, you know what I
Wednesday,
mean? Yeah.
and it was November, so it wasn't like it was summertime or anything like that.
I
Um,
was at school, man. I couldn't even go see it if I wanted to. I
yeah,
was at school.
yeah, but I went during 0 hour, and it was cool, and, obviously, it went on to have a big box office, opening weekend and such, but, um, that's as far as that goes.
That's really cool. I like that. You don't get that anymore. That's a really cool piece of marketing. Like the 0 hour, like they're going for the war for Zion. You want to be there, one of the first to see it. Here are the show times everywhere at the exact same time. You'll be able to see it. That's cool.
Yeah, around the entire world, and apparently that's never to my understanding, that's never
I've
happened before.
never heard of that before or after, to be
Yeah,
honest with
and
you.
what a risk.
Yeah,
What a
dude, like
risk.
6 a.m. showing, you know what I mean? And people were gonna go. 1 a.m.
Yeah,
showing, people were gonna
y
go. Like
right.
there was a rabid fan base, and you brought up the leather. Again, I remember going to see it at the theater and seeing people in line with the sunglasses, with the leather, and I was like, "Oh," and at the time, I wasn't confident enough to do something like that, like, I was still young, so I was still kinda like, "I don't want people to think I'm weird or call me a nerd or anything," but I was so envious of those people that they were that free. They were free of the Matrix, that they could go out and be like, "Yeah, we're here to see the Matrix." I was like, "Me too, but I'm just in, jeans and Nike, sorry."
So, we're gonna talk a little bit about the Oracle now. So, Gloria Foster, the original Oracle, she passed away before she could complete any scenes for the third film. So, she was all a part of the second film, as well as the game Enter the Matrix, which we
Mhm.
talked about before. Actor Mary Alice took over the role of the Oracle for both the third movie and the video game. The Wachowskis decided to establish that in the Matrix universe, programs living inside the Matrix can change and choose their forms and appearances. In Enter the Matrix, Oracle's change in appearance is addressed when she explains herself to Niobe and Ghost that the Merovingian punished her for directing Neo to him. This caused the Merovingian to lose the Keymaker and several loyal henchmen, and in retaliation, he stole her old residual self image, forcing her to use an older one, which also limited several of her abilities, like her
Mhm.
memory. In Revolutions, the initial conversation when Morpheus and Trinity meet the new Oracle was adapted to reference her changed appearance. The alternative was to have Morpheus and Trinity pretend to not notice, which perhaps would have been even more awkward.
Yeah.
Very interestingly, for its Spanish premiere, Foster's dub voice, Juana Buter, was kept for Alice, giving to Oracle in Spain at least two different bodies, but the same voice.
Interesting.
Yeah. Got some more about this here, about Gloria Foster. The late Gloria Foster and her replacement, Mary Alice, had played sisters in a long running Broadway play, something which casting director Molly Finn remembered when she was looking around for a replacement for Foster. And lastly, Mary Alice, the one that we knew from Revolutions, played Lawrence Fishburne's mother in his first professional stage appearance when he was only 10
Wow.
years
I
old.
like the connection. I like it.
So they didn't just get anybody to replace
Mhm.
the Oracle. They got a woman that had a connection to the actor and a connection to, another actor in the franchise and such. So really cool
That's
stuff
really
there.
that's really cool because, again, for anyone who wouldn't, know that information, it doesn't do anything, but for the actors and for the people involved, it's really, really sweet to have someone fill in that role with someone they had an actual connection with and worked with before. And in another movie that wasn't The Matrix, it might not have ever been able to be explained, but because of The Matrix and the rules within it, they have a nice way of maneuvering that and going, hey, this is why she looks different, and it's easier. Because as you mentioned, if Morpheus and Trinity had just ignored it, I think that would have made it like really awkward. Because then it's like, oh, is this just a studio decision where she was recast, and unfortunately she did pass away, but they're able to make it work within the context of the story, so that way it's understandable to us as viewers. Go, oh, okay, so she's okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and recasting happens all the time,
Mhm.
and it's always odd the first time we see that new character.
It is,
It's
yeah.
always odd, but the Wachowskis chose to embrace it as they rightfully should
Yeah.
have. To make this film visually distinctive from its predecessor, most of the action, as we mentioned, takes place in the real world. In The Matrix Reloaded, most of the action occurred inside the Matrix, so that was the parallel
Mhm.
between the Reloaded and Revolutions. Towards the end here, the street corner where Neo and Smith fight in the crater is the same corner from which Neo made his phone call at the end of the original Matrix movie. Um, you can see the phone booth to the right when they hit the ground, and this was in Sydney, Australia. Also, the black cat at the end of the film is the same one in the deja vu scene from The Matrix. It even
Yep.
meows. It even meows the same way.
I figured that the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, I bet that's the same cat.
Yeah. Lastly, for the trivia here, the lightning in the Neo Smith fight resembles the wings of a devil growing out of Smith, with an idea of the film being that Neo is a metaphor for Jesus. This presents an idea that the fight between Jesus and the Lord of Darkness, Satan himself, for the sake of the world. So they went
That's
full
fun.
on.
Yep,
They
they
went
did.
full on here.
Again, people sometimes don't realize how much directors will lean into that sort of thing, and the Wachowskis definitely did. So, like, I didn't
Yeah.
know that about the lightning, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I gotta go back and to find that.
Like,
So
I want to
that's
see
pretty
it now. Like, I want to go. Hold on, I want to kind of go back and see that one particular moment where the lightning comes up behind his back. I'm like, oh, I do see it. Okay.
yeah. So let's give some love to the cast once again here.
Yeah.
We have Keanu Reeves as Neo, Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus, Carrie Ann Moss as Trinity, Hugo Weaving as Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith as Niobe, Monica Bellucci as Persephone, Lambert Wilson as the Merovingian. We already mentioned this. Mary Alice as the Oracle, replacing Gloria Foster. Helmut Bacchatis as the Architect. Harold Perrineau as Link. Um, we have the young girl Tanvir K. Atwal as Sati. Um, Colin Chow as Seraph, Nona Gay as Z, Gina Torres as Cass, Bruce Spence as the train man. The actor that played Bane is Ian Bliss,
Yeah.
and Ian Bliss was cast as Bane in part because of his dead-on impression of Hugo Weaving, and for him actually partially resembling Weaving as well.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go down too far. We also have Harry Lennox as Commander Locke, our Swanwick
Swanwick, man. Swanwick, baby.
from the Zack Snyder verse there, and I think that'll be it. That'll be it.
Yeah.
So that's as far as our cast goes. So we're going to start winding down here with our closing thoughts. And for me, even when I go back, so this was as of this recording, it's late 2024. I go back, and anytime I watch this, I have the same feeling that I had when I first watched it. It felt like the end of a story.
Mhm.
It felt like, okay, so this is the end of the trilogy, and we're done, basically. And it felt like they left a lot on the table. And I don't know what I was expecting. And maybe the Matrix Revolutions and Reloaded, to a certain extent, suffered because the Matrix, we talk about this all the time, the Matrix was so
Yeah.
amazing that unfortunately the Wachowskis were never able to capture lightning in a bottle the same way again. But they had a story to tell, and they had to continue moving the story along in a way that made, I will say this, each film feels distinctly different from the previous.
Yeah.
So but I still watch it and I feel like, man, that's a bummer. Trinity died, Neo dies. Like, there's so much more that they left on the table, and that's okay, because at the time they thought they were done,
Mhm.
and they had to leave it open because, well, according to the prophecy, it's going to keep happening over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's not like the humans are ever going to win. It's not like anything like that. It's just, are they just going to have peace and they could just continue living on in Zion at this
Yeah.
point in this post-apocalyptic dystopian society, so to
Yep.
speak? So that's those are my thoughts here. You know, I just, every time I watch this, I feel like, man, they could have done so much more. But then it's just like, well, how much more could they have done? You
Yeah.
know?
It's a as we talked about before, I don't know if initially they had any plans to do any sequels, but The Matrix was just so successful and so revolutionary. It's almost impossible for a studio to leave that and go, yeah, let's not do anymore. Like they see money, they see box office, they're like, let's go again. As you mentioned, it feels very much like the climax of a trilogy. Like it does its job setting up the pieces, and part three is like, all right, we're gonna knock them down now. Again, one of the major reasons why we're in the real world so much. And I know that for a lot of people, that was somewhat disappointing. And I'll be honest, the first time I saw the movie, I was very much like, oh wow, there's a lot more in the real world. So we're not getting a lot of the awesome kung fu fight scenes and action scenes of that nature. We get a few, but they're few and far between. And then the movie gives me that amazing battle at Zion. And I was like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting this type of action in a Matrix movie, but I was grateful for it because it was reminding me again at its core what this story really was about. Like it's the war between man and machine. And it's just one of those things where, as you brought up, the Matrix is just so good. It's very hard to capture that again. It's very hard, and there's many franchises that suffer from that. I think there's something to enjoy in all of these films, even though there's certain setbacks in them as well. If anyone were to ask me, like, "Hey, Rick, do you have a particular order for the trilogy?" I would be like, "Absolutely. I think The Matrix One is a masterpiece. I think it is a perfect movie." I would then follow with Revolutions because I feel like Revolutions, everything has been set up. We know where the finish line is. We're just going to see how we get there. And there was still a lot of new and exciting things we hadn't seen before. Again, we talked about that final fight. That final fight is something that we haven't seen before in live action film. We may see it a lot today. You know, if someone were to watch a Matrix trilogy today who had never seen it, there's a lot of elements that they would recognize from other movies that were inspired by the Matrix. But for people like you and myself who saw these movies when they came out in the theater, we can remember seeing this stuff for the first time. And I think Revolution still offers a lot of that magic to a degree where, like, okay, we're still seeing things we haven't seen before. Maybe not to the degree of the first Matrix, but again, that final battle showcase some really, really inventive stuff, and I appreciate that. We had some major sacrifices, some emotional play. I think Revolutions is the most emotional of the three, which I'm all for. Like again, losing Trinity was a major hit. We also get some great somber moments with Morpheus. Never think he'd be alive to see a moment like this. We have a hopeful ending, which I wasn't sure we were going to get something like that. You know, we have this quest for peace. We have the sacrifice from Neo and this idea from Oracle that we might see him again. And as I mentioned earlier, like there was no plans to make any more after this, but I felt good walking out in such a hopeful manner, where in the first Matrix movie it was like, yeah, Rage Against the Machine, like this is awesome. And then in part two it was like, oh no, we got a to be concluded moment. Oh, I want to see more. What's gonna happen? And three, I just left with this like calm, hopeful feeling, like, oh man, we did it. Like there's this piece, Neo actually did it. So there's a lot for me to enjoy in this movie. Again, out of the three, I would go Matrix, then Revolutions, and then Reloaded. I think I've watched The Matrix the most, Revolutions the second most, and then Reloaded at the bottom of those three. Again, there's certain elements that they still leave on the table, but at the end of the day, like there was so much for me to enjoy here that I just have a good time watching it.
So you bring up a good point. For me, it's one, two, three in that order.
Mhm.
So obviously, one is a masterpiece. It's a cinematic
It's a
classic.
perfect movie.
Yeah,
It's
10,
perfect.
10 out of 10.
Yeah,
So,
baby.
and for me, Reloaded just introduced so much. I like the concept of new.
Mhm.
And while the Matrix, that's all new, but the fact that Reloaded continued to introduce new concepts, that's the appreciation I have for Reloaded. The fact that the programs have a mind of their own,
Oh yeah.
the rogue programs, and that cool explanation. You ever heard of vampires, werewolves,
Oh, dude, that
aliens?
was so good.
And then we see the twins who actually act like ghosts,
Mhm.
So, of course, shout out to the Merovingian and the beautiful Monica Bellucci is Persephone. She had a
Oh god.
great moment in The Matrix Reloaded. And as wild as the rave is, that's a part of it too. And
Oh yeah, dude. Like people know the rave.
as frustrating as the architect scene, it's all a part of the mystique of
Mhm.
Reloaded for me. So that's for me why if I had to pick a Matrix movie other than the original Matrix, for me it's Reloaded. Well, we haven't got the Revolutions yet, so maybe that'll creep in here somehow. But
Resurrections is going to
Resurrections,
be an interesting conversation. That is going to
yes.
be
Oh,
yeah, there's
yeah,
we're gonna have plenty to say about Resurrections.
yeah, we will. So those are my thoughts. But I will say this: there was a lot of recency bias. So when I watched it, once again, I was just so happy.
Yeah.
I was a younger movie watcher. I didn't care about the criticisms. It was complete suspension of
Oh,
disbelief.
bro.
Complete suspension of disbelief. Like, hey, this
Yeah.
is the Matrix, guys, and um, I didn't really realize how movies worked, and
Mhm.
I thought that the 4 years between the sequels was too long.
Oh
So
god.
I didn't understand that with a high VFX and special effects um, centered movie, it would no, they needed all that time. And then after I realized, no, they filmed Reloaded, Revolutions, and Enter the Matrix back to back to back. So it was like, oh, okay, that's why it took 4 years.
Yeah.
I was here thinking they could release another movie in 2 years.
It's there's a beauty to ignorance sometimes because as you mentioned, like we didn't really know and we're kind of like, oh, this and that, and we have a better appreciation for it now, knowing how long a project can take to get moving, to get made. Movies can be in limbo for years, especially sequels. Nowadays a movie can be scared off by a negative reception. The Matrix 2 did not have a positive reception, but they had 3 lined up ready to go. They're like, this movie's coming out. We're promoting this movie. And luckily, all 3 movies had a good financial return. And I'm always gonna gush about the trilogy as a whole because through its ups and downs, again, it just did so much for the movie industry, man. Like you can't, there are movies before the Matrix and after the Matrix. The Matrix 1 was revolutionary, and as you mentioned, they introduced a lot of great concepts in 2, and in 3 we're getting great technical achievements still. And I wish there was a way to allow people to see those movies through our eyes in that time period, to understand like how monumental they were. And again, it felt like being a part of something. When I think of pop culture movies where people felt a part of something, you think of things like Star Wars, right? Like what it must have been like to go see the first 3 Star Wars movies in the theater. I felt like for my age bracket, for your age bracket, one of those experiences was watching the Matrix trilogy. We got to go to the theater, see people dress up, talk about it at school, getting hyped for the video games, the animatrix, understanding that there were so many layers to this world that the Wachowskis had created for us, and knowing everything that happened as a result of those movies that we're still feeling today. If people don't think we're still feeling things today because of the Matrix, you're sadly mistaken. We would not have John Wick 1, 2, 3, and 4 if it wasn't for the Matrix films. That's just fact, you know. So I'm grateful we got to see these movies when we did. I'm very happy that they exist, and they'll always hold a special place in my heart for being what they were. I'm very happy. Even with the ups and downs, I'm very happy with them overall as a trilogy. As a trilogy, I can revisit anytime and see the goodness in them.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out to the Wachowskis, for just continuing on with their trilogy at a time where we were getting a bit of a genre film boom at the
Mhm.
time in the movie industry. The X-Men films, the
Yeah.
Bryan Singer X-Men films, they were doing well. I think Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy had just kicked off.
Oh yeah.
The Star Wars prequel trilogy, for all their criticisms, it was still an exciting time for Star
Mhm.
Wars fans, and such. And Blade had already started, before all this even happened. I want to say 98.
Yeah.
Um, so that was before, the original Matrix movie, which came out in 99. But just that early 2000s, like people were just geeking out,
Yeah.
left and right. There were superhero movies, science fiction. Um, there was a lot going on, and the Wachowskis were like, well, we're sticking to our thing. All these other things are blowing up right now, but we're sticking to our thing. And they, in the movie industry, it's so hard to finish a story.
Oh yeah.
It's so hard to finish a story, and love it or hate it, at the time, the Wachowskis got to finish their story.
Yep.
So that's as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Alrighty, folks. That was the Panel Bros official breakdown for The Matrix Revolutions. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at the Panel Bros, we'd appreciate it. Also, if you could give us a comment below, let us know how you felt about our breakdown. Let us know how you felt about Revolutions. Please do that in the comments below as well. We appreciate all of your views. We've noticed a bit of a viewership spike as of late. Thank you, everybody, for that, for your views and for listening. Those likes, share, and subscribes go a long way for our reach, for more people to view the content here. So we appreciate that. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.